In this video, you're going to learn how to intersect masks in Lightroom. So specifically, we're talking about a technique in Lightroom called mask integration, and the specific technique here is called intersect with mask using. And this is actually less complex than it sounds. But the idea here is that you're wanting to refine and narrow the scope of your mask. We do this by combining an existing mask with another mask. Right? So what we're doing is we're taking two masks and we're joining them together. And the combined mask will be the intersection of the two. So it only keeps the areas where the masks overlap. So if you think about two separate masks, joining them together, the result being a new mask where whatever is in common between the two original masks is kept in the new mask that gets created. So it's the intersection of two masks. The workflow here is to first create a primary mask, and then from there, you select the menu for the mask, the primary mask that you just created, and then you select intersect with mask using. And you can see an example of that on the right-hand side of my screen. In this case, mask 1 is your primary mask. And if you select the three dots out to the right-hand side of that, it's hard to see those here, but there's three little dots out here to the right side. If you click on that, you'll get a context menu that pops up. And what you're going to do there is select intersect with mask using, and then some other mask type. All right, so you have a primary mask, and then you have an intersection mask. And what happens is that the resulting mask will be a new mask where the only thing that's kept are the areas that were common between the two. All right, so what we'll do now, and this makes a little bit more sense when you actually see it in action, what we'll do now is switch over to our demonstration for this video, and then you get a better sense of actually how this works. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move into the demonstration section of this video. And what we're going to do here is to create a mask that targets the bright part of the sky in this photo. And we'll do that using the intersect functionality in Lightroom Masks. The goal here is to bring out the details of the brighter part of the sky without touching the darker parts of the sky. And so we can use this intersect functionality to accomplish this. First thing we're going to do is create the primary mask. Remember, when you're creating an intersect mask, you have to create a primary and a secondary mask. So the first step is to create your primary mask, which in this case is we're just going to use the sky AI function in Lightroom to do that. So I click on sky, and that creates my initial primary mask that covers the entire sky. So that includes both the bright and the dark parts of the sky. But remember that my intent here is to create a mask that covers only the bright parts of the sky so that I can make adjustments to the bright part of the sky without actually touching the dark part of the sky. So I have my primary mask at this point. What I need to do from here is to create the secondary mask using intersect functionality. Because remember, what I need to do is I need to take part of the existing mask and exclude other parts of the existing mask. So the intersect function works very well here. First thing I'll do is just rename my mask. And then from there, there's three little dots out to the right-hand side of the mask name. If you click on that, that brings up a context menu. And then what you're looking for is intersect with mask using. And then that brings up a second context menu that allows me to select my secondary mask, right? And so what you're going to do here is use some other type of mask, and then whatever's in common between the primary mask and the secondary mask, that's what gets kept as the final mask. Now in this case, there's several ways I could do this, but I'm actually going to use a Luminance Range mask as my secondary mask. And what that'll allow me to do is allow me to drop out the darker parts of the sky while leaving the lighter parts of the sky. Right? And then remember that sky mask it's already been created. That's my primary mask. What I'm doing now is creating a secondary mask, and what will be left over at the very end is only the parts that are in common. So I'll select Luminance Range, and that brings up the Luminance Range slider. I've done a video on the Luminance Range mask in the past, so if you're not familiar with how a Luminance Range mask works, you might want to go back and pick up that video before you continue here. But essentially what this is going to do, if you take the sliders and move them from left to right, that will remove the darker parts from the mask. And if you move from right to left, that removes the lighter parts from the mask. In this case, I'm interested in keeping the lighter parts, and so what I want to do is remove the darker parts. And so the sliders on the left-hand side allow me to do that. And so if I just kind of start moving from left to right, what you're going to notice is that the darker parts of the mask are now being removed. Right? The further you go, the more dark it, the more the range is that it removes. And there's actually two sliders here. There's the primary slider that you see here, and then there's a secondary slider as well. And the secondary slider, you can move back, and that allows you more control over the final mask that gets created. And so as you can see, as I'm moving that secondary slider, this is like kind of a feathering type of function that allows me to a little bit more control, or actually much more control over what gets included or excluded. And remember that I'm wanting to exclude the darker parts while leaving the lighter parts of the image. So I'm really wanting to kind of focus in on what's light and what's dark here with that secondary slider. And at this point, I think I have a pretty decent coverage there. So at this point, you'll notice that the mask only includes the light parts of the sky. Right? And there's not a right or wrong, not necessarily a right or wrong set of values here. It's just kind of whatever you have identified as light or dark. Right? So you see the farther left that I go here, the more dark it's removing, the more light it's keeping. So that works pretty well at this point. And so just to kind of recap what we've done here, I needed, for this particular photo, for whatever reason, wanted to focus in on the light parts of the sky to kind of bring out some of the aspects of the lighter part of the sky, but not really touch the darker parts of the sky. And so the best way to handle a situation like this is to use that intersect functionality, where you're creating a primary mask, which in this case we used a sky mask, which is an AI tool that identified the entire sky. But remember, I only want part of the sky. So the second part of the workflow was to use a secondary mask with the intersect functionality. And in doing so, our secondary mask was a Luminance Range mask that allowed me to actually pull out the darker parts of the sky from the mask and leave the lighter parts of the sky. And so at this point, what I can do then is just to go in and start making my alterations. So maybe I want to bring up the exposure a little bit, bring up the contrast, whatever it is that you're trying to do here to bring out some aspect of the lighter parts of the sky. It doesn't really matter exactly what we're doing here. But hopefully you get the idea, right? We're using the Lightroom intersect functionality here to identify or narrow down and do very selective editing of certain parts of our photo. So this is very powerful functionality for really narrowing down the scope of your mask and be able to do selective edits at a very fine-grained detail. All right, so that's all I needed to cover in this video. Appreciate you joining me, and we'll see you again soon on the next video. For more information, you can follow me at the following resources. I'm on the web at ericpimplerphotography.com, and you can also find me on Instagram at eric_pimpler.